Good evening, everybody. I hope you're having a nice time so far. I know I have. I had my first Aperol, so if I'm slurring some words, please, I do apologize. That's the reason why. Today, we're going to talk about a topic where everybody overnight started to become an expert for some reason. So if I go on my LinkedIn, there are loads of people who have opinions about this thing that we like to call artificial intelligence. We could have done the easy way and invited those people off LinkedIn onto this panel and listen to their nonsense opinion. But we thought, no. We're actually going to invite people who have the vita, the expertise, the experience, who could call themselves experts. Dare I say so? Who could call themselves experts on this thing called AI. I don't like to introduce other people because I feel like that's infringing on them. So I'd suggest we start with a brief intro round, left to right, who you are, why you think you're on this stage, and since people can also then use something, what is that one AI tool you can't do without on a daily basis? Thuy-Ngan, please start.
Hi, my name is Thuy-Ngan. I'm one of the managing directors at A11. And the reason why I'm speaking here is I don't have a degree in machine learning or whatsoever. That's not the reason. But the reason why I'm speaking here about AI is because I'm working with companies that actually want to implement AI and that want to understand what's actually the value behind using AI in the different business processes. And my favorite tool, or not my favorite tool, I have to admit, but the tool that I'm definitely using on a daily basis is Claude and still ChatGPT. I wish it would also be different or others, but still my companion.
My name is Nicole. Thanks for the invitation. I also don't have a degree in machine learning. I would probably say I really like the company. One of the companies on the AI campus, the job description for everybody is beginner. And I kind of sometimes feel like AI with generative AI and so on, that could also be a good job description. I started a company called Merantix Momentum some 6 years ago. We essentially work with our partners and clients and build AI products for them and ideate around business models. So we work for corporates, Mittelstand, and also for government clients. I'm also founding partner at Merantix Capital, so I also have the pleasure of investing very early stage in business models. So you can tell my head is really in like AI and data-driven business models for quite some time now. And I would say I use those tools. I also really like Manos.
Hi, so my name is not Christian, but my name is Liz or Elizabeth Laurent. I'm partner at Deloitte. We do large-scale data and AI implementations. So it's more of a different sweet spot than you have. So more 10 billion plus. That's sort of what we focus on. Aside from that, I'm a Gen AI founder. So I think I built one of the first Gen AI startups with actually use cases in 2020. I actually am doing my PhD in AI, but by training, I studied law. And my favorite tool at the moment is, I would say, Gemini. So I use Gemini a lot in the Gmail and the Google Suite context. I think has, for me personally, there are high productivity gains.
To finish off around, I'm Saman. I'm head of data and AI at A11. My tool is ChatGPT. Very boring, very vanilla. You're all people, you're all women who work in industries where there is a strong focus on creating value, whether that's with the companies that you get to work with, whether that's in the companies you've started, you've invested in. I want to go into something somewhat topical. Recently, there was this MIT report that made some waves. I'm seeing already some faces, going towards size, where this MIT report says, for those of you who don't know, it said, 95% of Gen AI pilot projects deliver little or no measurable impact, no return on investment. Thuy-Ngan, you've once said that successful AI implementation requires time and dedicated resources. Now, what is your view on these projects? What is your view on this MIT report? Why do you think so many of these projects tend to fail or do not tend to return an investment on the time and resources spent to develop them?
Yeah, I'm also curious to hear your perspectives, actually. So, but I'll first give you a bit of context of what this report is about. So, the MIT report is basically reporting on how AI is being used in the business field. And one of the key insights is that 95% of the companies that do implement AI or that have that strategy, they fail. And it's actually I read it and it was very reassuring. I was very happy to read it, but it also had some things that I questioned. And one thing or one reason why companies face, because they tend to want to build solutions themselves, which is very well, it comes with a lot of resources, and that means that it will also take longer until it's basically able to yield the effects that you want to see. That's first one, and the second reason that I specifically also experience very often is that some, especially from the leadership, sometimes there comes this decision. Okay, now we go full on AI, but without any clear idea of what that actually means. And what really helps is pilots knowing what are the processes, knowing your core processes, knowing where you want to actually automate and where you want to implement AI. It's not always Gen AI, as the report says. It's often also just like simple automations that can also help. Yeah, I'll stop here because I'd also like to hear the opinions from the other two.
I think first of all you have to look at the study more from different perspective, because it's they actually differentiated between models and tools, and so only the tools have that high failure rate. So if you do implement models in the back end, you have much higher success. So what I see is that and that was also mentioned, is the lack of strategy, what you said, but also focus on probably the wrong drivers. So it does help to look at where your business value is. And so as a procurement company, you shouldn't be focusing on marketing or whatever. You sort of have to look into your P&L and bottom up look on where your, what your business plan is and your forecast and how you budget. And I think we're just at the beginning of this sort of revolution and evolution. So the strategy should be adapted to that. And I think it's not really a show of failure, but it shows that we're in the process of learning. So I think it's great, and we should be iterating from that, and we shouldn't just give up, or the company shouldn't give up, and start sort of diving into the learning process. In a way, it's it's everything is sort of iterative, and there's not much else they can do, like there's no alternative than to spend money on it. And I think that's the core problem most people have, or most companies have, is that the IT spend, especially in Germany, is astronomical at the moment, and they don't understand really what to do. They spend a lot of money on training. They see no top line or bottom line, whatever impact. They see no impact on their P&L. And that was also one of the key aspects of the study, that the P&Ls were not impacted. But I'm not really sure what they were expecting, in such a short time frame. It was also a very small study, so it was only 52 companies that were really asked, and there were 153 participants that were questioned. So I think that study can be easily debunked. We just have to, we probably would see different results if we took the same study and asked the same questions in half a year. So I think it's just part of the process, and we shouldn't be too negative.
You can tell you can do a PhD right now, debunk the study.
I know, and I'm going to say delve a whole lot because I'm letting AI write it. No, I'm just joking.
Fantastic.
Think back to medical imaging, or like the computer vision revolution. That's like some 10 years ago. I don't know, the first company we financed at Merantix is Vara. They're doing breast cancer detection from medical images. It's a problem that's technically solved. Like medical imaging and diagnostics is basically something we know works. It just depends on the amount of data that goes into it. And it's been a while that it's been solved. There are some edge cases, and then think about how often this is in your daily life. How often does a doctor say, oh, we're also going to run this by AI, by the way, super fancy, huh? Nobody. Like, I don't know. I can count it, like my dermatologist does this, but that's it. And so I think a huge part of the equation is, to be honest, just this friction. Like, just because something is technologically available in Gen AI, and the study, is much more recent, but doesn't mean it will happen. And there are all sorts of mechanisms, like we just don't like to change our workflows. We're just like animals of habit. But also, like when you think of industrial products, like anything you touch or so, and like Germans are really good at that, so I use that as an example. There's something like ergonomics, right? It's basically how well adapted is this to your body or to the process. And I have the feeling we're just not doing this yet with AI. So when I look at large scale agent space rollouts or something like that, right? It's always easy to build this horizontal layer. Like we're going to do a RAG system, we're going to do knowledge retrieval at some level. But then actually the productivity gain, like often people sit in front of these systems, we're not that imaginative apparently. Like when we're just left to our own devices, like not day one at least. So now it's about like building more specific workflows. Okay, what can this do in a call center? What can this do in a marketing team? What can this do in the production line, in the logistics team, dispatch, etc. Right? So this is much more specific to build it really end to end and to make that a really cool and good product that people love to use and not something, oh, they copy. There's a disruption. I have to copy something, I have to open a different window. Like, who wants to use that? Like, if you think about it, you probably use ChatGPT or whatever because it's super easy and it's highly performing. And I think that's something we still need to figure out. So I would say everybody needs to dedicate a lot more mental space to addressing people's fears and frictions in themselves and acknowledging them, to creating governance processes. And I'm not a regulation fan, but governance process, like if you're a highly trained specialist in government or a legal profession, like you don't want something that's 70% good because you lose your job over that. So it needs to have like clear governance, like who is responsible for outcomes, human in the loop systems, right? To get feedback, to learn adaptively, and good UI UX. So you actually want to use it and you actually open that thing the first thing in the morning, because that's how we're going to get that value, is my hypothesis. So I think it's very soft. It's a very soft answer. I'm an economist or social scientist, I guess, technically. But I really think that's holding up a lot of these transformations at the moment to really unleash the tech tools.
Yeah. That's just one thing that I would like to add. And you spoke about a very interesting point. It's about what a lot of business leaders want to achieve is the so-called AI transformation. And the challenge that you're talking about is the resistance from the different employees. The funny part is that most of the people that actually work in the companies, they already use ChatGPT or something else. So it's what's very funny is that they already use those AI tools, but there's some, as you said, there's some sort of resistance though that they still might be replaced by some other system or whatsoever, and that's very interesting because it's not they're not. I wouldn't call it they have AI literacy, but they definitely have already touch points. They know how to use it and how it works and so on, but they don't want to have it in their work system somehow.
Let me add to that. Actually, at the moment, you're getting penalized within the German ecosystem or within the German workforce. You get paid less when you use AI. So, your superiors sort of penalize it. Your work colleagues are looking down on you when they see AI-generated emails. Actually, if you're a developer and you create or you generate AI code or code by AI, your fellow other developers are also looking down on you and value your code as, I think even when you're a woman, it's by like 7% less good. So it's culturally definitely a problem, like we do not like to read AI emails, AI generated emails, and the ability to detect it is still very high. So some would say over 90%. So most of us can really easily identify if something was written by AI and we disregard it, We disregard the person as maybe lazy, maybe incompetent, or maybe trying to cut corners. So I think that's one aspect. But the other aspect is clearly the value gains are sometimes or most of the times cannot be solved with Gen AI, but with super, super boring classic machine learning, classic algorithmic systems that can be implemented into supply chains. It's like super boring stuff. And I think Amazon coined the term boring AI, but it is boring AI, It's not the fancy schmancy stuff where you generate nice images or which is good, easily marketable and easily to be threatened of either. It's just like really systems that have been around for quite some time. So I think that's something. And the other thing is like definitely code generation is also where the value is at. So the backend optimization by generating code and by generating better architectures or detecting better architectures, that's very, very valuable. And that's really beyond like ChatGPT usage or auto generation of emails. I personally don't see the gains there. You know, maybe if somebody is like 10% more productive during the week, that's fine. But before you can actually replace those FTEs, that's going to be a long time, I think.
Yeah, there's a point that this sort of fancy AI, this generative AI, gets a lot of attention because it's much more visible, right? As Nicole said, a lot of the imaging that we had in the medical field, these are solved issue. I mean, linear regression, VGO to machine learning algorithm has been around since, the 50s, 60s. That's not cutting edge anymore. And yet, I just want to go back to this Gen AI example. Nicole, you once called AI the renaissance of humanity, which sort of goes against what you just said, Elizabeth, right? Where there is a bit of aversion, culturally speaking, where somebody sends an AI email, you're like, oh, I'm not even going to look at that crap. How does it sort of blend? How can we maybe get over this part of AI, even though it is definitely value driver, makes us more efficient, to get over it and just accept it, like we also accept other things in life, to not have such this con attitude against it?
Let me qualify my statement, and I stand by it. And it's been like almost 8 years, I think, I wrote that
I've done
article.
my research, yeah.
I mean, for most of human history, we've been living like our utopia was not to work. Like philosopher state, like let's focus. Like Plato would have been, like was very happy just philosophizing and talking about the good life and how to be a better version of himself and so on. And I think that's awesome, by the way. Just we needed slaves back then. That was not so cool. And now we're not even really there, because you know what Liz is saying. I mean, maybe we can automate 10% of what we're doing, and there's a big sense of insecurity about this. So I understand, obviously, we identify with work. I also identify with work. I don't want to discard this, but I think a lot of the discussions, and that touches the alignment problem that we're talking a lot about, right, these days, is like, what do we actually want technology to do? And that's, every company needs to think about that. That, I guess, that would be strategy, right? Every country needs to think about what AI should do for society or for the healthcare system or for public administration. And I don't think we're having that debate. Like, I think we're falling short on that. And I think my hope would be that AI can, I mean, it's doing it already for some of my more mundane tasks, and not perfectly. And, you know, I'm looking forward to the future. But I think that's on us. I mean, we just realize, I mean, that's also part of the truth, is some of the AI tools can automate quite a lot of what we're doing, not because they can reason well, they can't, but because we don't reason that much when we do work. Yeah, no judgment. I'm part of that. So no, I'm just saying, like, a lot of what we do is not necessarily, you know, like the pinnacle of humanity. And I do the same thing. I write emails, I copy paste, you know, I do stuff like everybody else. But that's also part of it. And I'm just wondering, like, where has that ambition gone? I'm just kind of like wondering a bit about it. And I don't even think we're even like halfway there yet. So
can I ask a question? Because you're also on the political side of things. Like, what do you think does it take from the political side of things to bring this forward? Like, what's the idea?
How much time do you have?
No, just because I've been wondering that. Look, I'm just coming. I just took an Uber. I came over from a podcast with a politician, and he asked me the same question, and I didn't have an answer. And so I honestly don't know. Like, do we need AI specialists in the government? Do we need like more ideas? Do we need like what can we actually do, you know, to bring this into sort of society or into Germany as a whole?
I mean, a few things I would say. First, so we do a lot of work also for the government, and I think there are a lot of really motivated people there, just to say that. And they're really very mission driven because they don't get private sector salaries, and they really want processes to improve. But there is no like overarching strategy. So we don't have a societal debate about what we want from technology, because we don't have a vision for where we're going. Like, we don't know this is the kind of country we want to build. And so, right, that would be the constraints you set for technology to kind of optimize towards it. That's, I think, one part of it. So mirroring also what you're saying, or what the study says actually about like why it fails also on corporate level. So that's one thing. I think qualification is one topic. It's just very hard also to even make competitive offers to people with high tech expertise. I mean, it's just a very tough market out there for highly paid talent. And then, I mean, just doing it. I mean, it's also a mindset that's very focused on risk aversion, and it will take also you to be patient citizens, because you're in startups, or I don't know, you're in innovation teams, you move stuff and some stuff doesn't work, and you will have to also be patient with your local administration, not laugh at them and hate them online for trying new stuff, because that's also part of the truth. That's, I mean, not immediately election, that shouldn't go wrong. We need to, but I think, there are different aspects. But yeah, focused platform, like so many things, and the tech stack and the data.
I have two thoughts on that though, because I do think that there's something that we do fundamentally wrong right now, which is the regulation. It just it just feels like a GDPR 2.0, and I understand that we need some frameworks, but I also think that this is hindering us in some parts of like how to use that. And secondly, and I'm becoming very romantic actually.
Ooh.
But I do think that there needs to be, there probably we need some sort of like, let's call it chief AI officer for Germany or whatsoever. But what actually we need is general AI literacy across the board, not only in the companies, but also at home, in schools and so on. Because if you compare us as a nation, as a continent, with China or any other Southeast Asian country, it's dramatic. Like how they use AI and their level of creativity in how they actually want to solve problems is fundamentally different, because they actually have a completely different way of how they want to work with AI and how they just grew up. And that's I mean, I'm not a big fan of China, don't get me wrong, and I also think that this has been a lot of PR actually, but there has been those news around that China now makes it mandatory for all children to learn or to have an AI course. I think it was like 6 hours per year or something. So it's not like huge, but those kind of things, those kind of signals, I think that is actually necessary to weapon us.
But before we go on the legislative level, I would argue we now have a lot of business leaders in this room sitting from a startup, scale-up and grown-up scene. Elizabeth, I'd just like to ask that question back to you, actually. Right now, we live in a country where fax is still, I believe, in 66% of all businesses, unfortunately. So before we even talk about AI, we need to get rid of fax potentially first. And unfortunately, there is also, outside of this startup scale-up bubble that we operate in, also a large part of a workforce that is just inherently skeptical towards AI in general, as you just sort of explained, also not just on a governmental level, but in families and schools and in the workforce. What is it that business leaders can actually do in the companies, in the businesses first, to get rid of this fear that whenever you introduce an AI tool, that their first response would be, I'm going to lose my job, and to move to that mindset of, I can do my job faster, better, more efficiently now?
So there's several things. I think first, in Germany we have a marketing problem, and in terms of we really market ourselves poorly, because I believe that we have a lot of substance, particularly due to our educational system, our free educational system. So we have a lot of smart, very well educated people. And secondly, our companies also have a marketing problem. Do you know who registers the most AI products, AI solutions with the FDA in the US? Siemens. Okay, so globally, Siemens is leading in AI. To be honest, and I think that why is nobody talking about it? So I talked to the Siemens C-level yesterday, and they said, well, we rather want to be the quiet winners. I mean, that's a problem, I mean, you lose talent, you lose traction and everything. So I think we have in Germany, our key problem in everything we do, we have a culture problem in a lot of ways, We are culturally not able to sort of like integrate migrants, to like put them into our workforce, to get them ready to be part of society so they become a problem. We're culturally not able to really invest in companies. So all of you startups, I mean, you're here, you like set up a great, you guys have set up a great fund, highly successful, but how many are there in comparison? We have the big German insurance companies that have all the capital in the world. Instead of investing into venture and becoming LPs in the big funds, they buy real estate. So that's a capital like a culturally problem in relation to capital. So we have this cultural problem, and I think, again, if you look at the adoption rates of German companies of AI, they're much higher than in the US, for instance. So we did a study. We looked, and even the German management outperforms the entire globe in AI adoption. We're better at, like, our management, our C-levels adopt AI for their own sake much faster than everywhere else in the world. They just don't talk about it, and so I think we are on a good path. I mean, we can't expect, the technology sort of like grows exponentially, but to bring change into organizations, it's more of a linear process, and you'll always have that delta between those two graphs, and I don't want to say have to wait it out, but I think it's a little much to ask from everyone to change overnight and to adopt onto new technologies overnight. I mean, if you look at the light bulb, it took 80 years before it got like really used. And why? Because people houses weren't electrified. So there wasn't any chance for people to use light bulbs. So the infrastructure was missing. And that's sort of the analogy to today. Today the infrastructure would be the tools, the education, the sort of like the licenses, the Betriebsrat, like the sort of employee representation that really hinders a lot. I mean, those are all components that sort of bring adoption faster. But as far like what I can tell, like people are they're very keen, they're very excited. They just have difficulties because companies are not buying licenses, Then again, the Betriebsrat compliance is coming around the corner. And what I've seen, the best approach is that the company lawyers guarantee that it will never have any legal repercussions if employees do anything wrong with AI. That's another thing, And from the legal side, if you negotiate with a Betriebsrat, with a representation of employees, and tell them, like, look, there's a carte blanche, nothing can go wrong, you just have to use it, then the adoption all of a sudden spikes, So I think we have to trust in ourselves, believe in our people, and see it sort of positively, and look around us, of course China is faster. If you have a system where you just pop something in from the top and force it through, then it's easier to bring such change. But in general, I think we're not doing a terrible job at it, to be honest.
Well said. Thank you. It's good to have some perspective every once in a while. We, unfortunately, another cultural thing in Germany, we like to complain a lot, right? It's very warm in here, by the way. Nicole, you work on a policy level as well. You've done some political work to a certain degree.
Very freshly.
Very freshly. May-ish, was it? But I believe.
Yes, May.
May onwards. Since I guess you still have a bit of a more political angle to such issues and such problems. How do you then rate this marketing issue potentially, as Elizabeth pointed out, this idea that Europe is just too bothersome, as some might say, when it comes to regulation? Like the EU AI Act came into effect earlier this year, and people are like, oh, it's stifling competition, it's stifling innovation. Where if you read the EU AI Act, it's actually like not that bad, really, particularly for most of the companies in this room potentially. But how do you see this balance of, as Elizabeth put it, on the one hand, we have countries like China where it's mandated and you just do it whether you want to or not. You've got the US on the other end of the spectrum where it's entirely a Wild West. You download books, movies, arts without asking them. Like Meta used 80 terabytes of torrented files, I read recently. How do you see the balance of striking the right balance of regulation, lack of regulation, and also ethical concerns? Because there is this unfortunate reputation of AI being inherently unethical to certain aspects.
So maybe to clarify my role, I'm in a volunteer position. I have no political power whatsoever, I would say, in terms of like I'm not a member of the parliament or minister or anything like this. So I try to reposition the German Liberal Democrats, and I also introduced some AI tools there, by the way. So AI is everywhere. I would say most of the policy work I've done was with the AI Association, with the Startup Association. So trying to work with the requirements and kind of influence policies to foster Germany and Europe as an innovative leader. So that's kind of the perspective I take there. And I think what you said is already there. Like, we're very focused on risks, not focused enough on opportunities. Mistakes are penalized more than, and you see this in investment. You see this in the regulation. I think is even not very, very well done, to be honest. Because, like, let's say those were the goals we have for data protection or for AI. I think we just realized that what we're doing is not really attaining the goals we initially had. So there's kind of a discrepancy. Like, people don't have the feeling that, I'm just like clicking on cookie banners or like on cookie consent forms or whatever, like
just accept or whatever.
I'm basically just accepting stuff because I still want to use the tools, essentially. So I'm not sure it has really changed that much. I also think this regulation is like our way of being differentiated is, I don't know. I don't buy that narrative, to be honest. At the same time, I'm super excited as an investor to invest here in AI startups because I do think there's a lot of substance. So I think there is kind of there is not really a word in English for it, but there is kind of some Untermut. There's like this concept of Mut. Übermut is like too much of courage, and Untermut is like a bit too little.
Right. Humility, maybe.
Sorry?
Humility.
No, I don't mean humility. I think you can be courageous and
Lack of courage.
Lack of courage, yeah, but I think it's like we just have a bit too little of it, and there might even be historic reasons for it. There were periods in Germany where we were very courageous, and it really was not a good idea. So there's also a lot of reason historically to be a country with humility. I totally get that, and I also second that. I like humility in general, but I think this courage of like rebuilding, of building, of experimenting is just kind of lost, and it's discouraged everywhere. You're not encouraged to think everywhere, right? Like no, like better not do that. We don't have big digital business models. I would say even in Mittelstand, sorry to say so, in Mittelstand, where I would say structurally we have actually a really cool structure for implementing innovation because it's family-owned businesses. And so the decision maker is the owner and basically can just go like, we're doing this tomorrow, right? So it's like pretty optimal. But I don't know, when you say we're the world leaders in this, like sales cycles are still longer for startups selling in Germany than in the US. Government is using less of this than in the US or in China. So
can I add to this? Look, I think what's significant is the government involvement. In 1939, Hewlett-Packard was founded in the Valley. And ever since, the US government has invested in the Valley. And it was at the beginning, it was sort of a defense project. A lot of defense technology was invested in San Francisco and all the areas surrounding it. And the US government forced VCs basically to invest into defense startups in that region and in that area. So the growth of that entire ecosystem was not by coincidence, and it was definitely not a free markets situation that sort of grew. And I'm missing that here, and it takes really a lot of effort from all sides. It takes a lot of courage. I agree with you, but it has to be sort of a group project that's been missing, in my opinion. And I agree with you. The Mittelstand has all the power in the world, and they have all the data in the world. They have very relevant data to train, to fine tune, to retrain models, to actually do the industrialization 2.0. It's like, they have data of machines that are highly valuable, and especially Germany, where we have a lot of machine Bau, not a lot of building little screws, and that's highly valuable, and they can easily take it forward. But like you said, they just have to have courage to do that, and they also need a little bit of capital because it is expensive. It's a forward investment. It'll pay out in 3 to 5 years. It's not necessarily you see any change in the P&L in the next 12 months, but it's something, it's a path you must go, or you have to go, because otherwise you will be left behind, I think.
Yeah, maybe one addition to that. So about the whole, basically how the Silicon Valley developed and so on. Yes, also because the government, or a lot has been basically run by the DoD. But the reason for that is because the founders in the Silicon Valley, they truly believe that the technology that they're building is ready for mass market, but the only buyer that they would be able to find that would essentially increase their ARRs to get the funding was the DoD.
Department of War, it's called these days,
gosh,
indeed.
yeah.
Get with the times.
Yeah, difficult times. Yeah, and well, I don't want to say that, or I don't want to evaluate that, to be honest. But in the last years, we did definitely go into times where, well, let's say in Germany and also in Europe, we divested in defense, and now we're coming again into that phase where more money is being pumped into the defense sector. And we're also seeing that obviously in the whole VC system, in the startup world and so on. And we shouldn't forget that a lot of new technologies that have been fundamental in changing and revolutioning the society and everything around life have been basically also, well, driven by military purposes.
And you know why? Because the AI Act doesn't apply to military purpose AI applications. So from a regulatory perspective, the AI Act is the number one preventer for innovation. And the AI Act, however, it doesn't apply to not only to dual use, but to like military drones, for instance. They can deploy whatever system, they can, run whatever system, train whatever system they would like, and it's not applicable. So that means that they will evolve much faster. And then I personally believe that it will be then reintegrated into the normal tech system. And I think it will amplify everything, and it will speed things up. So I do not think it's a bad thing that's finally happening, and that we have started to invest into defense again. It's urgently necessary.
But just to clarify, you do think innovation is possible also without high defense spendings?
I do believe, or
you think there is like a necessary
I don't think that it's necessary, absolutely not, but it definitely fuels it. Yeah. Well, I would say that it accelerates.
I think it's necessary because at least with the current state of the regulatory environment we have.
I think overall we can agree that capital is sorely lacking in our ecosystem to essentially just drive a bit more growth compared to what other economies are doing in this area. We've got time for one last question before we open up the floor for some Q&A. I want to look forward when we do this again in, let's say, 5 years. We could call it the alumni treffen back then. We've graduated university and do this again. We started with a very discouraging MIT report, which we, I think, argued quite well against. But let's say if we sit here again in 5 years and we start this whole round again, what would happen in the next, or what should happen in the next 5 years, not beers, later. What should happen in the next 5 years so that we can look back on now and we say, this was good?
I mean, I think what will happen is we will talk much less about AI in 5 years, because I think it will be more natural in certain applications. And we will just not, I mean, for the sake of citizens, I hope we're still aware that it's AI, but I think it will be more native in a lot of systems. So I hope that, in a way, I hope that happens, because it means we're further along in the adoption curve.
It's got to sort of goes in the direction of what you also said, Elizabeth. You said that you don't believe that the Gartner hype cycle really applies to AI, which is something that I think is brilliant, actually, because we had, I think, 5 AI winters so far already since the 50s, 60s.
You read my LinkedIn, huh?
I'm not going to divulge my sources.
Open AI.
But I think that's nice what you just said, Nicole, because we don't talk about the internet anymore, right? We don't have state of internet panels these days. We don't have state of electricity panels.
It might be fun, though. You should do an alumni treffen on this.
We should do an alumni treffen.
You should do it, yeah.
It
would be fun.
That's what has happened since then. So you think a commoditization of AI as a technology into our daily life is something that you wish happens?
So in 5 years, I think we will see, until then, we will see a highly disrupted labor market. And you can already tell by how the US is developing. So US has an unemployment rate of 5.5% in the sort of young sector and the young cohort of the graduates. So the national average is 4%. So they have difficulties finding jobs because the entry-level jobs get replaced by AI first. So I think that this disruption will also happen in Germany and in Europe as a whole, or the globe as a whole. And we will see a lot of shifts. So we will see a lot of retraining. I think it's, at the end of the day, a good thing. So people will be able, like your hairdresser of today might be a lawyer tomorrow because simply they can with AI. Why? Why not?
Is that a good thing? I was like,
I know. I think it's totally possible. So I think in 5 years, that transition will be over. And at our alumni meeting, we'd probably be sitting there like, that was a stressful 4 years. We had to, probably from the government, had to set up an AI endowment fund or something to catch all these people who didn't make it through the transition and help them along. But at the end of the day, I mean, when has the technology not really made the country more productive? Or society, it has always been a good thing. So I'm positive, but it's going to take a while.
So for commoditization, you've got disruption of labor market. Thuy-Ngan, what do you want to add to this?
First of all, regarding the disruption of labor market, it's very it's quite interesting because we're already seeing it now in some of the areas where we're working with, for example, in talent acquisition, the junior roles, we're not hiring them anymore because essentially that can be done by AI. And I've been thinking a lot about okay, so what does that mean for the people that do actually want to enter the job market at some point? And also, if you think about engineering, right? If a senior engineer will always be able to say if a code is well done or not from an AI, but a junior developer, how is that person able to make that judgment? Because he or she never had the opportunity to write so much code to actually come to that stage. And I have two thoughts on that. One is you will always in some areas need the people that actually just are always very curious about learning about what's actually the new trends, what are the new tools that I want to use, and so on. And secondly, I don't know if that's a solution, to be honest, but again, I'm very romantic about that. Maybe it's also just about shadowing seniors to know and understand what's actually good code. But coming back to your question, but I found it very interesting. My hope would be is that, and that has nothing to do with business, but my hope would be that we would be able to understand for not only us, but also people outside of this room, what is a deep fake and what's not, because that's something that seriously really makes me still I'm very optimistic about AI and so on. But if I think about my son and if I think about how he uses media and so on, that's definitely something that I want to engage more into, and where I think we have to work on.
Thank you so much for all of your thoughts. These are thoughts that AI can't yet generate, so we have to be grateful for as long as we can. Please give it up for Nicole, Thuy-Ngan, and Elizabeth.
And thank you to you.
Thank you. And we now have about 11 minutes and 29 seconds for some questions.
And my question is the following. Right now, everybody is obviously asking the question how to deploy AI. But the truth is, we've been trying to deploy new technologies in corporations for, 20 years, right? So 5 years ago, it was the cloud. And then before that, it was analytics. And at some point, it was email. I mean, you name it. And so we've had this problem for many years. And I was just wondering, as you go ahead and now deploy AI, what are the learnings that you can generate, or what you have generated or using from previous deployments of technologies that were new at the time and maybe, comparably disruptive?
I mean, I'm not sure how much of this is inspired by implementations of, let's say, the internet or other things. But I think when I speak to CTOs at the moment, there is an incredible amount of tool fragmentation, right? So the tool landscape looks very messy right now. And I guess if you're talking about implementation, you're thinking, and as a CTO and as a CFO, for sure, you're thinking about scalable implementation, and you want things to scale very well. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to build systems that scale well with infrastructure, right? And at the moment, I would say you have certain cloud infrastructure that's in place. You have also other infrastructure like around data layer or ERP systems or other systems. And I think if you want to build it scalably, it's going to be really tough to keep a zoo of like 72 different platforms and solutions. And that's a real tension. Because everybody and their grandmother is saying, oh, this would be a cool tool to implement. Can't we also introduce this? And it creates a lot of distraction in the tech team. And it's this kind of point between like trying out and seeing what fits. But then I think you need to focus on like 2-3 core technology layers to really get it scalable, because otherwise it's just like, I don't think you can really tame the zoo. And the complexity right now is, for example, for the agentic orchestration layer or something like this, people are not there yet, right? They're like, oh, is there an independent vendor, or is it my hyperscaler? Or so people are kind of looking for what that layer will be, I feel.
And to allude to that, I think one core learning from the last years was to look at it from a more holistic point of view. So you shouldn't just hire one person, or shouldn't make one person really responsible for the AI transformation inside the entire organization. So you have to, exactly what Nicole said, it's you have to orchestrate the whole thing. So it's an interplay of good data and data governance. And in my opinion, like all the big tech companies, they all offer very good solutions. So whether you be with Microsoft and you do the Copilot thing, you have Google, you use I don't know, Databricks or anyone like that to do your data, and then you build applications on top. So I think this whole like there's a whole buy versus build thing that in the past people tried to build, through the past technological advancements and revolutions, that does not work. And in this context, it doesn't work. So don't even try. That's my advice. Secondly, get help. It's nobody has, or very few people actually have experience with this. So find yourself somebody who can really help you with this. And thirdly, also this zoo of tools, I agree, but you also have to look out for one thing that's called a vendor lock-in. So don't be too dependent on one supplier, because eventually it will become very, very expensive. So you have to sort of find a middle ground, but in general, I would just get help.
First of all, thank you very much for that really good insight that you gave. And I really liked your point that, the momentum of the masses is not here yet. We're four front runners here in this room. And, but, the masses and the implementation will follow and takes more time. You mentioned just one thing right now, the lock-in. Could you please elaborate, and maybe all of you, on how we have a lock-in into the US systems? And is there any European alternative? Because all the tools that you mentioned are based, I've not heard Mistral at all. So is there a chance from the European point of view to be an active player on the basis level? Because we're talking about the big and the large language models. In that case, there's other, if you look at narrow AI, that's a different story. But can you say something on that? And were we going to be on that sovereignty topic, on that space? So thank you.
A few thoughts on this. So I think the vendor so one thing is there are open source tools for most of the things you're trying to do. So if you don't want to buy agent space, you can go on Onyx and you can do it, and you can completely personalize and adapt it to your individual corporate needs. It just requires a pretty high level of sophistication, right? So I think there is I know there is open source tooling for most of the things, but it's not like enterprise bulletproof, right? So it's more difficult. And I think as European tech ecosystem, we don't have, and there is this initiative, Eurostack initiative, for example. So they're working on basically replicating what a hyperscaler does, because a hyperscaler is like basically they're giving you cloud, giving you data infrastructure, giving you like all the different layers up to application level where everybody can build applications onto. And if you want to get this, let's say European, then you need to start building your puzzle, get ready for a bumpy ride. You kind of really need to know how everything interacts and kind of plug it together yourself. And I think, that's a lot to ask, right? Because if we're honest, so I don't think it's wrong to do that, but it's a trade-off. It's just a trade-off for complexity and sovereignty and speed and ease and comfort. And I'm totally pro building this Euro stack, and we also support it as Merantix. But it's also, if you're a human and making this vendor decision, it's also understandable that you're like, ooh, it's already difficult, and all these people are talking about change management and all the people and everything that's like really complex in this MIT study. Do I also want to add this complexity to the project or not? I don't know. I mean, you see where most corporates are going. I think a lot of them are now more aware, and I think that's good. But it's also just part of reality that it's like to have a multi-cloud, multi-agentic orchestration layer setup is at the moment still quite.
I think the only thing you can do is to have your own cloud in your own basement. So you buy a bunch of H100s and stack them in a rack and have it LAN, so you don't have it like a cable, so you don't have it connected to the internet. But the core problem is, for most people, that's not an option. And cloud is always going to be governed by U.S. laws, because U.S. law, the United States has an idea or a system that they have overreaching legislation, which means through the Cloud Act, they always have access to your data unless your data is really encrypted and you have bring your own key. BYOK. So if you have it encrypted on your own, with your own algorithms, basically, then you're kind of safe. But at the end of the day, if they feel like it's relevant for terrorism or national security, they have an overreaching arm. But look, I mean, but this is like a common business risk. We all have phones that are run by systems or by software that's produced in the United States. We all use things that are produced in China. I mean, the notion that all of a sudden that our software has to be local is like, I don't buy local tomatoes because they don't grow in Hamburg. So I think I understand the notion and I value it, and we offer sovereign cloud, sovereign this and that, everything. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a very, very difficult task, because just what you said, like the implementation of AI from end to end is difficult enough. And to ask for open source systems that are then fine-tuned on your own data, that are running on your own sovereign cloud, I mean, you need to hire an entire AI team of 5 to 10 engineers to really just make that happen. So I'm hopeful that eventually as Europe, we get our act together and we have like our own, have our own models. Maybe, Mistral is going to make it. Maybe Aleph Alpha comes up with something crazy. Like, it can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Look at DeepSeek. It came out of nowhere, and because they had like a new architecture and could train more efficiently. Maybe they can train on a different set of chips. They're all variations. I don't think it's totally excluded. But at the moment, enterprise software is governed by like the big four, basically. Max 7, whatever, the big companies, tech companies.
Yeah, and one addition to that, so users do not make decisions based on if they basically support a certain country. They just go with like what's the best product. And luckily right now, I think it's actually very easy to switch because, yes, we are all working a lot with LLMs, whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, or whatsoever. But I wouldn't say that it's difficult because at least looking at me and myself, I'm still testing a lot to see like, okay, how is this responding and so on. So I do think that there's still that option, but the question rather is if that's the space where you want to play, or if European sovereignty in that sense should actually lie somewhere else.
Pick your battles and stay pragmatic, basically, is the motto here. Sounds like it. We could spend much, much more time to talk about these topics as they're incredibly insightful and interesting. Nicole, Elizabeth, and Thuy-Ngan will stay on for a bit longer in these halls. So if you want to ask them a question later, if they allow it, you're going to do it there. But this would now conclude the State of AI panel. Once more, thank you so much, Elizabeth, Nicole, and Thuy-Ngan. Incredibly insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.